Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman and it's Microsoft Ignite. We are here at the Learn Session 243, How to be a Software Developer. As with all live sessions, there's lots of fun live things that are going to happen. We're actually going to answer your questions live. We've got Hani Shaban and Safia Abdullah here, both software engineers at Microsoft. We did have a few technical interesting issues, and Safia is actually dialed in right now because her computer's indisposed. So we'll be seeing Safia's website and hearing her voice from a dial-in, and Hani is here as well. And hopefully we're going to have a great bit of time, and we're going to answer your questions live. This is live, so when you leave a question, we've got moderators that are going to make sure that they come in and we'll get those questions answered for you, and this is going to be great. So let's do this. Let's start with Hani, and let's get a short introduction, a little bit of a sense of what you work on, and then briefly why you became a software developer, Hani.
Alrighty, sounds good. I'm Hani, and if the accent doesn't give it away, I'm British from origin, and I became a software developer because I like solving interesting puzzles, and I guess the puzzle box got, too narrow for me, so I started tinkering with electronics from really young age and found myself messing with computers and took me into software development. And I guess what really made it stick is actually all the interesting people I got to find along the way and everyone's little niche and interesting background I got to learn from and build my own technical background from. So that's what kept me here.
Very cool. And let's hear from Safia on the phone.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Safia. I am a software engineer in an organization known as the Developer Division here at Microsoft. As the name might suggest, I help build products for developers. And similar to Hani, I got into computers at a very young age as well. And I love the problem-solving aspect of working with computers, as well as how there's always something new you can learn. And it's just very satisfying for someone who's as curious as me. And I was very lucky to be able to take that curiosity and that interest that I had early on and turn it into a career eventually.
Fantastic. I'm hearing from both of you that there was an initial curiosity, that you knew that somehow that you were different. And I've heard that from a number of people who have gotten into software engineering. And I'm curious if that has made you feel that exposure, early exposure to computers is important for someone, or can someone get started later? Hani, what do you think about that? Early exposure, or can someone be a career switcher in middle age?
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head actually in the question phrasing. The curiosity is really the key, and it's definitely not something that I've seen that like an initial exposure leads to, greater or lesser success in the field. It's totally just that willingness to learn and grow that you kind of build and continue to build as you go through the career path. So being open to conversations where someone's going to tell you something from completely left field, and instead of kind of sticking to what you know and just trying to make it work like that, being really willing to dive into that and engage with it is really what I see building people's success in the space, whether they are new or whether they've been here for years.
That is a very thoughtful answer. What about you, Safia? How do you feel about your early exposure to software and to computers?
Yeah, totally agree with what Hani said. I don't think it's all about age or when it happens. I think the most important thing is when you have that realization that a computer is not a device that you use, but a device that you control and can use to create. And for me, that happened at a very young age. For different people, that happens later on in their life. And whenever you make that realization that this is something that you can create and build with and tinker with, that's really when you unlock your curiosity, and you can do that at any point in time.
That curiosity is absolutely essential. We hear that again and again. There's a question, though, from the audience, which is a really interesting one, and I have an opinion, but I'll leave my opinion until the end. Hani, do you think that software engineering is an art or a science?
An art or a science? That's a really great question. If it's possible, I don't want to cop out on the answer here, but if it's possible to combine both, I definitely think computer science would be the example of that, because there's totally times that you have to really get creative and work around the edges of the problem, if you will, because throwing yourself at it maybe from your personal skill set right now, you're just not able to figure it out in the time frame you need, or there's so many ways to be creative and figure out how to solve the problem in unique ways. That's the art aspect. And then the science aspect really stems from that puzzle solving nature that Safia mentioned earlier, the ability to really look into the technicals of how does something work and why is it behaving the way it is. that's obviously where the science comes in, and you kind of get this nice blend of the two. So that's, you know, I'll stick with that answer, I guess. I don't think it's either. I think it's both.
Interesting. Safia, what are your thoughts on that? Science or art?
Yeah, I think I lean towards it being more of a science than an art. And I'll clarify why a little bit. I don't think that creativity is something that's purely in the realm of the arts. I think creativity is a skill set that you can apply to really anything. And why I think that working in engineering and programming does lean a little bit more towards science than art is because of a lot of the day-to-day that I find myself doing as an engineer. It involves things like doing analytics, forming a hypothesis on why I might think a bug is occurring, and then invalidating that hypothesis or validating it. And then from that conclusion I draw, going in and making some other hypothesis. So this very scientific process in a way. And of course, just because it's a science doesn't mean that there's not an element of creativity or exploration to it. And I think most scientists in a traditional sense would probably agree that the best science has elements of art to it. So yeah, I think it is a little bit more of a science than an art with what I find myself doing day to day, but that doesn't preclude it from being creative or engaging more of your left brain.
Interesting. A lot of really interesting questions coming in here, and I'm going to actually do a double question for Safia, and then we'll go back to Hani. Questions about where to get started. It seems like that's the thing. Where do I get started? And people want to know what the technology is that they think they should focus on, and that's a really tough one. It's like, what language should I learn? And is that even the right question? Is .NET the way to start? Is C#? Is Python, or does it matter? What do you think, Safia?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the question of how do you get started is really can be overwhelming for a beginner. One thing I'll say is don't focus too much on the technology, especially when it comes to things like programming languages or like, you know, what kind of database or very specific implementation aspects, because those change as the industry develops and new things are always coming out. Once you learn your first programming language, you can pick up future ones pretty easily because you've kind of trained that muscle. So instead of focusing on a particular language or technology, I would kind of come up with a problem that you want to solve. Do I want to build a mobile or web app to do something? Do I want to do something with IoT, maybe build some sort of microcontroller or device to solve a problem that I think is interesting? Do I want to not use technology in any of those contexts, but maybe do something totally different, like work with machine learning or AI? So once you know what kind of problem you want to solve, then you can start to answer the question of what technology is helpful to learn. But always start with what problem you want to solve or what area you want to be in before kind of diving into language and tech.
So Safia brings up a really interesting point, but if I don't even know the set of Lego elements that I can snap together, how would I even know where to start? Hani, what do you think about that? Like, she's bringing up a great point. Don't focus on the language, focus on the problem set. But, you know, non-technical parent doesn't know that machine learning even exists. What do you think?
I'm a huge believer in taking it even one step further along the same train. You don't know which technical bricks to start with. Start with your project from like a non-technical perspective. What is something that interests you, or you've seen people struggle with, or you think would be really fun to build? Start from there and set yourself a really, you know, understandable goal, something that you could tell your friends about, that, you know, hey, I'm trying to make this, and, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to make, you know, I've seen some of your series on arcade cabinets. That's one example, right? Everyone can relate to that, you know, wanting to have a cool arcade cabinet, or like maybe build an automation system for their home, like curtains and things like that, right? Things that you've seen and interacted with, and you've started to wonder, how do those work? Well, you know, pick one that interests you and really drives and motivates you to build and see your project through end to end and learn along the way. And that's where all those technical bricks will come into play, because you'll think, okay, well, I need something that will tell my curtains when it's daytime, so I need to look into sensors and maybe Arduinos, or you'll start researching, you know, how do I make a computer do X, or reusing those resources. And then once you get to the stage where you've really understood which technical bricks you need the depth on, there's tons of great resources out there, like, you know, the learning paths on Microsoft's aka.ms/learn that you can go and engage with in terms of all the free Azure tooling you can use to try out and really start getting your hands dirty once you've decided what your project path should be.
Interesting. So there's a lot of pieces out there, Safia. There's a lot of different things to potentially pick, but how do you move beyond beginner, right? Like, I know that I can open the hood of my car and I could maybe change a spark plug, but then I get confused and I get scared and everyone says, well, you haven't really been a driver until you've taken the entire car apart. How do I move beyond beginner?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a couple of different approaches you could take with this. The first is you can try to solve the same problem multiple times and see if you can learn new things with each iteration. So an example of this is maybe you set a goal that you want to build a mobile app that's a Twitter clone. You can start by doing it in one set of programming languages. Once you've done that, try using a different technology, and then you'll be able to like compare things. You'll exercise that muscle of being able to pick up new tech and kind of understand how it works. And as you keep iterating, you'll kind of strengthen those muscles. So one approach is like solve the same problem in different ways until you've kind of seen all of as many of the different ways as it can be solved as possible and learn through that. The inverse of that is kind of find the technologies, or not technologies, but find the particular problems that you're interested in learning about, and then work in those areas as deeply as you can. So if you want to focus on web applications, take that particular area and then split it up to front-end technology, which is a very large area that you can do a lot of exploration in, and then maybe dive into backend and servers and then bounce off of that into cloud. One of the things I think is really great about programming is that you can grow into it very organically. A lot of the problems are very connected to each other. So you might start off in one place, and then before you know it, you've kind of started to learn about something else by virtue of how connected everything is. So I think also don't hesitate to just kind of flow and let yourself kind of explore those spaces organically as they come up in your learning process.
So I'm hearing a lot from Safia about exploration and about depth. I'm curious, Hani, how deep do you go though, right? I mean, do you go down to the quantum realm? Do you go down to assembly language? If my job is just to make text boxes over data, I might like exploring. You and Safia might enjoy exploring, but how deep does one need to go if the goal is become a software engineer?
Yeah, I think software engineering, to me at least, has always been about, you know, meeting a challenge and meeting a need. And whether that stems from having the background and being the expert already in a field that then you can bring that background and experience and apply to a problem, or if that means you're willing and able to rapidly pick up things and rapidly learn and solve the task at hand without knowing any background at all, both of those can be experts in my book. Someone who really can take down any big challenging problem, digest it to its component parts, and, you know, make progress on it. Both of those to me are valid types of experts. So I'm really interested by this question, actually, because it strikes something that I've always kind of wrestled with myself, which is, when are you an expert, and how do you define expertise in a way that doesn't, you know, prevent you from continuing to engage with things that you're still passionate about, right? There's always more to learn and there's always more to dive into. And, you know, the balance of how much you need that skill versus how much it's a personal project or passion, I don't think should limit you in any way, right? Ultimately, at least for me, the goal has always been to make my job feel like it's not my job, right? I just want to do what I'm doing and love what I'm doing. So if you can meld those two, in a sense, I guess I don't know the answer because I haven't had to answer it for myself. Basically, you keep going with it until you find something new that interests you and organically move to that.
I'm curious, Safia, when we hear Hani's perspective on that, and I think about my own perspective about how I don't necessarily know really anything about computers. I'm just a really good problem solver and I enjoy the challenge. But a lot of people find it very daunting to get into software, and they find that there's just so much to know that they stop right away. What can we do to ease their entry into software and make it easier for them to then become explorers without us being gatekeepers or anyone trying to keep them from being successful because we want them to go deep?
Yeah, I'll start off with this and say that I've been working as a professional in the industry for a while now. I've had the opportunity to explore a lot of different areas, and by no means will I say that I'm an expert or knowledgeable in completely everything. And I think this is kind of one of the key things I would like to drive, at least, is you can never truly know everything there is to know, and no one is truly an expert. It goes back to the kind of concept that we've been repeating of curiosity. You always have to be willing to be curious and explore things that you might not know. I think part of it is ultimately, one, embracing that sense of insecurity or anxiety around not knowing everything, and then recognizing that it's okay to not know everything, because that means that there's always more to learn. And you'll always be curious and fulfilled in that role. That's what's really exciting to me about the industry. With regard to gatekeepers, I think if there is someone out there who is telling you that you need to do everything or know everything, and if you don't know everything, you are somehow lesser than as an engineer, then they have probably missed the point of what working in software or as a programmer is, because it's truly about being always willing to learn and dive into new areas. And that's something that I do every day as part of my job.
We hear this term imposter syndrome, and I'm starting to hear with the last year of quarantine getting on all of our nerve, that imposter syndrome also tends to lead to burnout. I know that a lot of us are not necessarily managing our time very well, so there's so many different factors: being overwhelmed, feeling like you don't belong, gatekeepers, feeling like an imposter, the overwhelming amount of technology that you need to learn, and the idea that we don't have a commute now, so you might as well work 2 more hours a day. I'm curious, Hani, do you think that there's a relationship between imposter syndrome? I don't know whether you have that or not. I have had that in the past, and how it relates to burnout and what you do to avoid burnout.
Yeah, totally. I think the overlap is interesting in that imposter syndrome is kind of something that we all probably have gone through at some point, even in the office, working from home. But then the shift in work environment, I guess, is really, at least for my team, being a manager, I've seen it kind of crop up almost like a second wave, if you will, to use the COVID analogy that was staring me in the face. It's interesting because I think it stems from ultimately a shift in mindset. Your frame or what you're focused on kind of shifted in such a way that you start to think more about what others are doing, or how your perception really of what others are doing is what you're measuring yourself against. And that puts you in this mode of like, wondering if you're good enough, or wondering if you're really an expert in what you're doing. And Safia's point earlier really is the cure, if you will, in my book. It's recognizing that if you're solving a problem or you're working on a problem that someone had the answer to, it's not something that you needed to know already. It's just something that you need to be able to find out and go and learn and apply to whatever problem you're solving. So as soon as you're able to step back and lean on your peers or your team or anyone who you're collaborating with in the open source space, those are kind of the avenues that you can kind of pull on to manage that burnout, in my opinion. And on top of that, also being there for other people, recognizing other people are also burning out or suffering from those same challenges, and reassuring them. The office conversations we're so used to of someone coming by and helping with a code review or giving you an idea and a brainstorm that we all kind of miss. Finding ways to make space and time to actually recoup that, whether it be virtually or through emails or whatever your mechanism is, can kind of give you a little a burst of energy in the day, I guess, that really helps with the burnout.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that answer. Safia, I'm curious, I've always appreciated your website. Your website actually is safia.rocks. So you actually have you kicking butt and rocking in the actual domain name. Does that mean that you've never had any kind of imposter syndrome? And I understand that different people in different places in their lives, different people's background, they may not feel that they have the liberty or the privilege to have imposter syndrome, and they use that to drive themselves forward.
Great question. I would say I almost have a clinical case of imposter syndrome at times. I think there's something that everyone experiences, especially in an industry where, you're working with people who might potentially have more experience than you. I work in open source, which means that a lot of the code that I write is out there in the open for people to see. And a lot of the feedback that I get on that code is out in the open for people to see. So it's it's kind of a very vulnerable position to be in, and you feel like every mistake is being scrutinized. That certainly contributes to imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome in the sense that, I have to kind of work hard and potentially burn out in an effort to mitigate that. I think one of the things that I've tried to do is learn to live with the imposter syndrome. I think there are aspects of it that are actually pretty healthy, because it shows that I recognize that there are ways that I can improve. And I'm willing to recognize that I'm not this know-it-all who is totally got a grasp on everything. But I think there's negative elements to it, which is that you find yourself kind of holding yourself back with this like extreme amount of self-critique, and sometimes you have analysis paralysis or just a lot of self-doubt about things. And some of the ways that I mitigate that are, keeping screenshots of instances where I get praise or acknowledgement for some of the technical work that I do from coworkers or colleagues. I also keep a learning log, a weekly learning log of things that I'm learning, so I can see as time is progressing, I'm picking up new things. I know a lot more today than I did 3 weeks ago. And I try and just put myself in a position where I'm constantly recognizing my growth and making sure that I don't discard it when I have those thoughts of self-doubt or feeling like I don't belong or I'm inadequate. I remember, hey, look at all these things that I'm learning. Look at how people are reacting to the good work that I do, and keeping that at the forefront.
That's a really great answer. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about you, Safia, is I've watched you kind of learn and grow in the community, because you started in open source and now you're at Microsoft, still doing open source and doing amazing things, is that you are intentional and deliberate about your learning practice. I know that you keep notes, you write things down. When you are having a moment of imposter syndrome, you stop and you think, and you are in that moment and you go, all right, I'm going to use that to drive me forward. I've been a big practitioner of deliberate practice, and I've even gone so far as to think that being intentional, being in the moment, and being focused and deliberate is what makes a great software engineer. Hani, I'm curious what you think about that. If that sense of being in the moment and being present and not just letting your life happen by default has helped you be a better software engineer at Microsoft.
Yeah, I think so. Though the way you phrase it may be a little eloquent for the chaos that sometimes feels like chaos methodology. Sometimes I feel like I'm going through. So I think stylistically there's different applications of that, and the theme or the underlying success metric, I guess, is in being conscious rather than necessarily deliberate in what you're learning. Because for me at least, I am a little bit more chaotic. I like to try different things and experiment very rapidly, and then decide once I've invested a little bit of time whether it's worth continuing to pursue and diving deep into, and make that deliberate commitment that you and Safia are outlining, compared to the note taking and the stylistic choices that are made in terms of how you best learn. And that aspect I think is more in flux. I've seen people who learn way faster than me, just from watching someone else do something. I could never do that. I'm totally a learn by doing type of guy, right? So stylistic choices aside, the key is really making sure that you're reflecting and growing internally by looking at how you're committing your time and looking at how what the return on investment is from your time, essentially. Like, is this something I'm enjoying? Is this something that I'm finding useful and that I'm going to continue to use? And based on that information that you've reflected on, deciding whether to continue and commit, or put this down for a bit and pick up something else that maybe you think has a greater value or you might enjoy more.
That is a wonderful answer. I really appreciate that. What's nice about Hani's answer, in my opinion, is that there's a loop there. There's in a loop. He's looking at his time. He's looking at what comes out of his time. And whether it's the developer's inner loop as you're typing and hitting refresh, or typing and hitting F5 in your Visual Studio, you want to optimize that loop so you can fail fast, fail often, and fail safely. Hani is applying those same analytical abilities that he applies to his own experience as a software engineer to his own self. So he's actually debugging and optimizing the loop of his learning process. As we get towards the last 5 minutes here, I'm going to steal a minute or two at the end to talk about some of the things that you who are listening to this great panel about how to be a software developer can do to learn how to be a software developer. But I want to hear just a few moments from Safia and then from Hani about how they learn, how they keep up to date on the latest technologies. Safia, how do you learn every day?
Well, I want to reiterate something that Hani mentioned, which is that I personally learn best by doing. So if there's a new technology that I'm interested in exploring, I will try and find a tutorial for it, maybe in the release notes or something like that, and just follow that tutorial. I also tend to be the kind of person who learns really well by reading code. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. So if I see a new technology that's out, I will pull open the source code if it's open source, which most interesting things are these days. And I'll kind of read the source code and annotate it, and I'm kind of learning about how it works and also picking up some best practices for how to code as I'm reading through it. And when I'm not able to do that, I do enjoy watching YouTube videos. There's quite a few online creators who produce technical content that I think is really fun and engaging. And I usually will have that playing in the background while I'm working, and that's kind of how I learn stuff by osmosis sometimes. So yeah, doing, reading code, watching YouTube videos.
Pardon me, I was muted. Doing, reading, watching. That's a great triad of things to do. One of the things that's interesting about what Safia said is that she reads code. If you were going to become a great writer and write the world's great novel, you got to read a lot of books before you can write a great book. And reading code is so essential. And I don't think that people read enough code. It's hard to find a nice maintainable code base. It's hard to know where to jump in because there's no page one. How do you learn every day at Microsoft, Hani?
For me, it's kind of a mix of many things, I guess. I'm a big learner from shared experiences, so I really love engaging with YouTube channels like Safia mentioned, but also podcasts and other places where people discuss any kind of problem solving is really kind of what hooks me. So whether it's technical or outside, I find the mechanisms of problem solving to be reusable irrespective of the problem space. So working on my car or working in the tech world, hearing how people approach a problem, get stuck, get in the weeds a little bit, what makes them break out of that frame. There are loads of lessons there that I love picking up on and trying to apply explicitly. I have a little black notebook of, try this next time. Next time you're stuck, try this, and trying to apply that practically because, like I said earlier, I'm more of a doer for my learning style. And aside from that, the big one for me is investing in the workflow. So I strongly believe that, you learn best when you're making progress. And to me, what that means is the best time to learn a new technology is when I'm, sometimes we all get into that place where we're frustrated with what we're working with or something is really challenging. And the question that I love most often and my favorite projects always come up from is, shouldn't this be easier? I feel like I could try something else or do something else. And instead of just continuing to push ahead with what I'm doing, I should try to break out of this by spending some time refreshing myself and picking up something else. Let's do some research, find an alternative technology, read through that code, read through people who have used that code. That's also something that I think people overlook a little bit, is not just the reading of how the code itself works, but also what kind of problems have people solved with that code, and does that relate to your problem? Is there an interesting pattern you can pick up from there? Those are all really interesting ways that I've been able to kind of kickstart projects or alternative solutions to whatever I'm working on throughout my career at Microsoft.
Fantastic. As we get towards our last moment here at this session, Learn 243, How to Be a Software Developer, I want to send this information towards you, my friends. Check out Microsoft Learn. There's a huge area here where you can discover your path, whether you're an experienced developer and you want to get 300 level, 400 level stuff, or whether you just want to get started and learn on your own schedule. You can go up there, you become Microsoft certified. And I want to encourage you to check out this section over here called Learn TV. Learn TV lets you watch live and recorded events. It's one click to community. That means that at any moment, someone is up there talking about code and they want to help you. They're excited for you to get involved as well. You can get certified, you can become a cloud developer, a data engineer, all kinds of different things. And for our friends who are joining us at Microsoft Ignite, you can take a look at opportunity.linkedin.com and you can get a certification offer and take a look at some of the great things that are happening up on LinkedIn Learning. So between these things, LinkedIn Learning and Microsoft Learn, I hope that you discover your path. And I want to thank our friends, Safia Abdullah, software engineer at Microsoft, and Hani Shaban, also a software engineer. Thank you both for your time, and and Safia, great job dealing with some of the technical issues and calling in. We do appreciate you doing that. Goodbye, everybody.
No problem.